Good morning, All Souls Community Church. It's Thursday, April the 9th. Holy Thursday, Maundy Thursday. And as we get started this morning, I want to point our attention to something that we're about to participate in tonight, and that many of our Jewish friends participated in last night. This Passover Seder, this Seder that Jesus was actually a part of the night he was betrayed. The supper that we call the Lord's Supper was first and foremost a Passover Seder, and it struck me freshly last night as I considered my friends celebrating the Passover, that this isn't the first time in God's history with his people that he would put them around a table to celebrate this Seder in the midst of a plague. In fact, the Passover Seder, the Passover itself, was God's answer to the plagues. It was God's salvation through the plagues. If you remember the story, God's people Israel were in slavery in Egypt for 400 years, and God sent a deliverer in the person of Moses. And Moses was God's spokesperson, through whom God sent a message to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh resisted, and so God sent these plagues, 10 of them. None of them were random. I don't know if you realize that, but none of them were random. In fact, one of the things that God first goes after with the plagues is the Nile, right? He turns the Nile from water to blood. Why? Well, because the Egyptians worshiped the Nile as the source of life. And so when God wanted to expose and emasculate the false idols of their culture, he simply went after the Nile and showed, look, it actually doesn't have any power. What's one of the other things God did? He turned the sun dark. Why? Because the Egyptians worshiped the god or false god, Ra. God wanted to show there's no power there either. What's one of the other ones? Well, remember all the frogs that God brought? Well, Hecate was the Egyptian goddess of fertility. And so God, when he wanted to expose that Hecate actually had no power and was also a fraud, what did he do? He put all these frogs and all throughout the land. You talk about fertility, right? Frogs everywhere. God, with each one of the plagues, was exposing that the Egyptian gods were no gods at all. But he was also driving the story somewhere. Because if you remember, the last plague that he brought was the plague of death. And death was no respecter of persons. In fact, God promised that as that last plague came, that one thing was going to happen. The firstborn son of every house was going to die. And it's interesting how random that it would be the firstborn son. Again, not random at all. The firstborn son of every house would die unless one thing happened, unless a lamb was sacrificed, hence the Passover. And the blood of the lamb put on the doorpost of the house so that when the angel of death came, they would pass over the houses that were covered with the blood of the Lamb. For those of you who know Jesus, this story, it starts to resonate inside of you. It starts to bring up memories and thoughts of when Jesus first came on the scene and his cousin John saw him there. And what did he declare? He said, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." You see, from the very beginning of God's story with his people, the most important story of redemption was the Exodus. It was where God first identified himself as Yahweh, the great I am. It was the place where God showed, I am going to redeem my people. I'm going to save them. And here's what the one thing I want them to celebrate year after year after year, this Passover, where they celebrate the fact that a lamb was slain and that the blood of the lamb saved the firstborn son. And then here you have, in Jesus, God's firstborn son, coming to be the Lamb of God, so that all who put their trust in him, who are covered with his blood, are saved. Do you understand now why tonight, as a church, we will be celebrating the Passover Seder? Not gathered together like we love to do, as is our habit, but in our homes. So 6:30 tonight, we're going to go, we're going to post a video on our website, on our YouTube page, on our Facebook page. For all this stuff, you can just go to our website, allsoulscommunity.com/access. We're going to have a video there that's a devotional introduction to our Seder, giving you the big picture and encouraging you in how to approach this. You're also going to find our PDF, a PDF of our Haggadah, the telling that brings you step by step through the Seder. And you're also going to hear me encourage you to then gather with your family around the table. And if you don't have family around the table, to Zoom, to virtually meet with friends or family, and then to walk through the Haggadah together, to walk through this story so that we can celebrate the entire thing, that God has been the same God yesterday, today, and forever. He is the God of redemption. He is the one who comes to save his people, not simply from slavery in Egypt, but from slavery to our greatest enemy, slavery to death itself. It's who our God has always been. It's what he's always been about. And it's why we will celebrate with great joy tonight. I hope you can join us. See you at 6:30.